Gerald, who was far away in Sacramento, did not know what had happened in Los Angeles. In fact, it was quite difficult for Mike to contact Gerald now. He could only ask Tyrone of Glory World. However, because Mike had been constantly harassing Glory World previously, Tyrone had long been unwilling to see them. At this time, Gerald was at the door of the pancake shop. Looking at the woman in a black dress in front of him, he said in surprise, "Why are you here?" This woman was the woman he met in the bar, Gigi. Gigi held the textbook and said, "I am a teacher in this school. As for you, why are you here?" Gerald coughed and said with a frown, "I used to study here. I came to take a look." Gigi stood beside Gerald. She looked at him awkwardly and said, "Well, I brought you some trouble before." Sorry. Previously, because she came to drink with Gerald, Andrew misunderstood and caused Gerald to have some conflicts with the people in Flame Bar. At that time, she even thought that Gerald would be seriously injured. Gerald waved his hand and did not take it to heart. Gigi gritted her teeth and asked, "Are you free tonight? I brought you some trouble that day. Although you are fine, I always feel like I owe you a favor. I want to treat you to a meal. We just met by chance." "Don't take it to heart," Gerald said calmly. Gerald felt that there was no need to contact a woman who would fall in love with Andrew. This made Gigi stunned for a moment. Whether she studied at school or became a teacher now, she never lacked pursuers. Every man would rush to her like a flock of ducks. At the very least, they would fawn at her. But this man in front of her, from the first time she met him at the bar, Gerald seemed to have never looked at her face. When Gigi was at the bar, she almost sent herself to him, but Gerald just drank alone and ignored her. After coming out, he even asked her for another half of the bill. "Okay." At this time, the middle-aged woman held a pancake in a paper bag and handed it to Gerald. Gerald took the pancake, "Ads by Pub Future," and paid the money. Then he looked at Gigi beside him and said, "Bye. Friend May online." Gigi gritted her teeth and said, "I don't like owing people favors. There is no need. There are not many opportunities to meet in the future," Gerald said. He did not continue to pay attention to Gigi and turned to leave. Looking at Gerald's back, Gigi gritted her teeth. Fenna. At this time, the owner of the pancake shop asked, "Do you like him?" Gigi blushed and said, "I only met him once. What's there to like? But he seems better than the last one." The middle-aged woman smiled and said, "I'll make it for you now." Gigi looked up and asked, "By the way, how is your shop going?" "It will be closed in 2 days." The middle-aged woman said with some emotion. "Nowadays, it is difficult to move without money." Gigi gritted her teeth and said, "Those people are too much. We are just normal citizens. We have no money and no power. We originally came to find a lawyer, but when those lawyers heard that we were going to sue the Kenneth family, they were not willing to accept our case at all. We have no choice but to accept fate." The middle-aged woman sighed and said. Gigi pursed her lips and opened her mouth to say something, but in the end, she couldn't say it. She just sighed. On the other side, Gerald took a bite of the pancake and grinned. "It's still the same. It's delicious. I think only Kawang's cooking can compare to it." He licked his lips happily. After taking a few bites, his phone suddenly rang. Gerald picked up the phone and looked at it. He found that it was a message from Red Rose. His heart was moved. Could this guy have tricked the leader of Blood Lotus? He quickly picked up the phone and said, "Hello. Turn back and take a look." A sexy voice sounded from the phone. Gerald turned around and looked behind her. Not far away, a fiery red figure stood there. She was wearing a red dress, revealing her slender thighs and perfect figure. Wherever she appeared, she would always attract the attention of all men. It was Red Rose. Gerald's expression changed slightly. He walked over and looked at Red Rose. He asked, "Are you stalking me?" I'm only doing it because I want your body. Red Rose covered her mouth and smiled. Looking at the coldness in Gerald's eyes, Red Rose hurriedly said, as a man, you are really not flirtatious at all. I am just doing some business here. Oh. Gerald put down his guard and took a bite of the pancake. What's the matter? That old man dares to come out. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. It's still quite difficult to lure him out. Red Rose shook her head and said, I just received a call. I think you should be very interested. Gerald raised his eyebrows. Blood Lotus. Judging the level of the killer based on the color of the rose. The yellow card is the lowest, followed by the blue card, the red card, and the gold card. In addition, there are several top killers like us who are uncertain in color, Red Rose said. Gerald glanced at Red Rose's chest. There was a beautiful rose there, which was very eye-catching. Red Rose noticed Gerald's expression and grinned. Does it look good? Do you want to feel it with your hand? It's very good. After saying that, she licked her lips and was extremely charming. Gerald's heart trembled violently. He fiercely bit his pancake and restrained his impulse. This woman was very dangerous. I am afraid that the poison will kill me. Gerald chewed and said, I know the grading system of Blood Lotus. Why are you telling me this? Do you want to give me a lesson? I just received a phone call. It was a call from the number 1 Blood Lotus gold medal killer, Birdman, who ranked 19 on the killer list. He was on his way to Sacramento. Red Rose looked at Gerald and said with her red lips. And then, did he come here for a mission? Or did he not pay you when you slept with him? Do you want me to kill him? Gerald asked. Who do you think I am? I always give money to others when having sex. No one has ever given me money, okay. Red Rose looked at Gerald coquettishly. Then she chuckled and said, he has 2 things in his hands. You should be very interested. Huh? Gerald raised his eyebrows and asked, what? 3 people and 2 knives. Red Rose said faintly, 3 people, one is called Irene. One is called Mary, and one is called Vivian. Gerald's expression changed, and he instantly understood. He looked at Red Rose and asked, the 2 knives are called Void-Breaking and Nameless. These are the top 10 artifacts in the Underground Weapon Manual. Red Rose smiled and said, the 2 knives that used to belong to Watchman number 0 actually fell into our Blood Lotus hands. When will they reach Sacramento? Gerald asked indifferently. What? You want to save your ex-wife? Come with me to the hotel. I'll tell you, Red Rose said with infinite charm. My parents don't allow me to spend the night outside, Gerald said with a smile. Red Rose curled her lips, and then she said with excitement, hey, you are a challenging man. I like it. As expected, you are a fucking pervert. Gerald cursed in his heart. Previously, when he was on the subway, Red Rose disliked him for not being challenging. Now that he was unwilling, Red Rose continued to tempt him. He was really speechless. When he arrives in Sacramento, I will tell you. Red Rose said with a smile. Gerald nodded. Red Rose asked, is it for your 2 knives or your ex-wife? Gerald pondered and said with a smile, both. After that, he added before Red Rose could reply, well, if there is nothing else, I will leave first. To be honest, what Red Rose said was indeed very tempting, and she had been tempting Gerald all the time. Gerald was worried that if he continued to stay, he wouldn't be so determined. Besides, now Red Rose was clear about his identity. Although the 2 of them were cooperating, Gerald still could not believe 100% of any people from Blood Lotus. No one knew whether Red Rose was pretending to cooperate and trying to assassinate him. If he could not resist the temptation, he might die on the bed from the poison on her body. Wouldn't that be annoying? After saying that, he turned around and left before Red Rose could say anything. Red Rose looked at Gerald's figure and grinned. It's challenging. I'm so excited about it. After saying that, she licked her sexy lips again. After leaving for a distance, Gerald frowned. He did not expect that his 2 knives were still at Irene's house. Over the past 3 years, he did not notice it. Shelton suddenly died. Later, Gerald did not dare to touch the things at home. He pondered and said, just treat it as saving you again. Shelton saved my life. This time, it should be all over. At that moment, Gerald's phone rang. He picked up the phone and looked at it. It was a call from Jessica. Gerald answered the phone. Hello. Jessica's voice came from the phone. Hello, Gerald, do you have time tonight? Yes. Gerald nodded. I've finished most of the company matters. Let's meet tonight. I've finally found the chance to treat you to a meal, said Jessica. Okay. Gerald nodded. Do you have anything you want to eat? Jessica asked. You can consider any restaurants in Sacramento. Don't care about the price. You can choose whatever you want. Ads by Pub Future. How about seafood? Gerald asked tentatively. Jessica was slightly stunned at first, and then nodded and said, okay. Then let's go to the restaurant on Phoenix Road at 7 o'clock in the evening. No problem. Gerald nodded and said. Hanging up the phone, Gerald showed a smile on his face. He had a good impression of Jessica and her daughter. It was just 3 o'clock. There were 4 hours until the appointed time. Gerald ate the food in his hands and ran into a cafe next to him. He played the game until 6:30 in the afternoon. Then he got up and walked out of the cafe. When he walked out, a man came in from the door. This man had a buzz cut and was quite handsome. He walked into the cafe as he was playing with his phone. When passing by him, Gerald was slightly surprised and glanced at him. It was not because this man was handsome, but because Gerald sensed a trace of danger in him. There are so many unordinary people in Sacramento. Gerald touched his nose and said, if he had seen the staff information of Glory World in Sacramento, he could have recognized this person. It was Eric, who was in charge of Glory World in Sacramento. Eric's home was near this cafe. Gerald did not know him. He just looked at Eric in surprise. Eric also glanced at Gerald and did not care, continuing to walk towards the cafe. Walking to the bar, Eric took out his ID card. At that time, Gerald's appearance suddenly came to his mind. Then, a photo appeared in his mind. It's him. Fuck. Eric roared. Then he ran downstairs in large strides. When he ran to the first floor, he happened to see Gerald getting into the taxi. Fuck. Wait a minute. Eric roared. Gerald heard it, but he did not know this person. Naturally, he did not think that Eric was calling him, so he told the driver the address and went to Phoenix Road. Looking at the taxi leaving, Eric was stunned. He slapped his face and shouted, fuck. Why was I playing with my phone? If I had taken him to see my master, then I would have been free. Eric was not in the mood to surf the internet. He put away his ID card, turned around, and ran into the neighborhood next to him. He ran to his room. Just as he entered, he saw a short-haired beautiful girl sitting on the sofa. On the coffee table, there were snacks. She was watching TV and eating snacks. Seeing the scene, Eric felt complicated. He hurriedly said, Master, you should eat less. If a girl eats like this, she will grow fat. I have been eating like this for 3 years. Have you seen me grow fat? The girl looked at him and said calmly. Eric wore a sad face and thought, you are not fat, but I have been spending a lot of money because of you. Didn't you go to the cafe? The girl looked up and asked. Eric then came to his senses at that time. He hurriedly said, Master, I saw that man. The girl put a bar of chocolate into her mouth and chewed it. A cold light flashed in her eyes. Is it someone from Blood Lotus? No, it's the man in your photo. You were lying on his back. I met him at the entrance of the cafe just now, Eric hurriedly said. What? The girl suddenly stood up and asked, where is he? He took the taxi and ran away. Eric smiled bitterly. When I met him, I was playing with my phone. His hair grew long, so I didn't pay much attention to it. When I realized it, he had run away. The girl revealed a disappointed expression first, and then stood up excitedly. Her eyes were red as she said, I knew it. I knew. He wouldn't have died. Gerald didn't know that he and the girl he was looking for had missed each other. When he arrived at the restaurant, it was full of people. He saw a girl with short hair at the door. She was wearing youthful clothes and stood in the doorway. It was Jessica's daughter, Daphne. When Daphne saw Gerald, she smiled brightly. Then she hurriedly walked over and said, Hi, Gerald. This was the first time that Daphne had spoken to him. Previously, Jessica had always been by her side, and she had never spoken to Gerald. It could be seen that she was somewhat afraid of her mother. Well, it's not easy to have a meal with you. Gerald touched his nose and said. Daphne smiled, revealing two dimples. She said, Let's go in first. My mother is still on the road. She must be stuck in traffic. Gerald nodded. Inside, they originally wanted a box, but they were told that there was no one left. Finally, they had to eat in the hall. After sitting down, Daphne said, Sorry, I should have invited you to a meal and apologized to you earlier, but my mother's company seems to have some problems, so she has been busy. Gerald nodded and said, It's okay. Are you still studying at school? Do you major in painting? Daphne nodded slightly and replied, Yes, I am studying at the Academy of Arts. I am still in my second year of college. I heard that there are a lot of beautiful women there. Gerald subconsciously smiled and said. After that, he was a little regretful. Daphne replied honestly, There are quite a lot of beauties in our academy. If you want to find a girlfriend, I can introduce them to you. Well, isn't this Daphne? At that time, a voice sounded in a place not far away. When Daphne saw that person, her expression changed slightly, and her eyes revealed a trace of disgust and fear. Gerald looked over, and then his expression changed slightly. The person who spoke was Justin. Justin also noticed Gerald, and his face darkened. Why are you here? Gerald was speechless. What he wanted to say was also what Gerald wanted to say. At Justin's side, Tyrone was also there. Tyrone was like a dog at the side of these top rich young guys in Sacramento. And he seemed to be proud of being the dog of these rich people. Justin wore a faint smile on his face. He looked at Gerald with disdain, and then said to Daphne, Daphne, how do you know such a person? This guy is a rapist, and he even uses drugs. You have to stay away from him. When she heard this, Daphne did not change her expression much. She just pouted her lips and said to Justin, Who I am with has nothing to do with you. You have quite a big temper. I said that for your good. You should thank me for that. Tyrone sighed and said. Gerald, who was at the side, was slightly surprised. When Tyrone mentioned that information, Daphne remained calm, as if she had already known about it. In the past, when people, including Audrey, heard Gerald was a rapist, their expressions would change. They looked very uneasy. In a short period of time, they did not even know how to communicate with Gerald. Daphne was not like this. She seemed to have already known. Justin said with a smile, Don't always be sarcastic when you talk to me. After all, we almost got married. Why don't you reconsider it? Look, I like you. My father also likes your mother. What a happy family. Piss off. Daphne was obviously angry, and her face flickered with anger as she roared. Gerald frowned slightly and was just about to speak. At this time, a cold voice sounded. Justin, don't go too far. The person who spoke was Jessica. She had just walked in from the door. Jessica had light makeup on and was dressed professionally. She was mature and intellectual. There seemed to be no trace of time on her face. It seemed that she was just in her early 30s. She was carrying a bag in her hand, and there was a trace of coldness on her face. Justin turned around and looked at her. There was a trace of fear on his face. Then he chuckled and said, Jessica, what I said is the truth. You see, you are a single mother. Although you are not short of money, it is very difficult for you to raise a child alone. Everyone knows that my father has feelings for you. Moreover, speaking of this, his expression changed slightly, and he continued, and this way, it can also solve the problem of your company. You married my father, and let me date Daphne. We'll become a family. In business, of course, we can work together. Jessica didn't want to talk with him anymore. She directly took out her mobile phone. Come on. I am sorry, okay. Justin saw her take out the mobile phone and said quickly. Then, he looked at Gerald and said, Jessica, let me remind you. Gerald is a guy who seduced Bree 9 years ago. It's better for you to stay away from him. Ads by Pub Future. Gerald frowned, and Jessica sneered, I know better than you what kind of person he is. Hurry up and get out of here, or I will call your father immediately. Justin's face was glum. He looked at Gerald and said with a gloomy gaze, Gerald, very good. We had plenty of time. You are in Sacramento. I will take my time to play with you. Slowly, Gerald shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Seeing Gerald's appearance, Justin became even angrier. Justin glanced at Tyrone and said, let's go. After they left, Jessica sat down in front of Gerald and frowned. Gerald, you should stay away from those rich guys in the future. He is notorious in Sacramento. Gerald waved his hand, indicating that he did not care. Since someone in the Kenneth family had set his father up, and it was an important reason for Gerald's imprisonment, then there was no way to peacefully settle things between him and the Kenneth family. Therefore, whether Justin provoked Gerald or not was not that important. It was just that Gerald might teach Justin a lesson. Anyway, Gerald said, it's you guys. Just now, Justin said that there is a business competition between you and the Kenneth family. Daphne gnashed her teeth and said, it is Justin and his father who are doing this. Justin is chasing after me. And his father is chasing after my mother. We do not agree. They put pressure on us. Gerald was stunned. This was really a fucking weird father and son. However, when Justin saw a beauty, no matter if he could get her or not, he wanted to give it a try. Jessica glared at Daphne and said, Daphne, don't talk nonsense. Then Jessica looked at Gerald and said, let's not talk about work today. We invited you to dinner mainly to thank you. Do you know what happened 9 years ago? Gerald asked. Jessica looked at Daphne again. Daphne hurriedly shook her head and said, Mom, I didn't say anything this time. Gerald explained, Justin said this just now. You two didn't look very surprised. You are so calm that you seem to know it. Am I right? Jessica looked at Gerald in surprise. She did not expect that Gerald could actually think of so many things through these details. However, Jessica still nodded and said, indeed, I know. Before at the airport, you said that you were from Sacramento. You have not returned for several years. Daphne is a little curious about you, so she went online to check your information and found the previous news. Speaking of this, she frowned and said, but I'm good at reading people. Back then, when you were willing to help us, I felt that you were not someone who could do such a smiling face casual date is just a click away thing. Of course, I was just guessing. Moreover, it has been 9 years. I did not take it seriously. Gerald was surprised. Since he returned to Sacramento, anyone who knew about his past would be biased. Jessica and her daughter were the only people who had no prejudice against him except Jacob. In Gerald's heart, his good impression of the two people increased again. Gerald explained, I was framed. I came back to Sacramento this time to prove my innocence. In fact, I don't care much about this now. I just don't want my parents to be looked down upon by relatives and friends. Jessica was stunned. She pursed her red lips and said, I have some connections in Sacramento. If you need my help, call me at any time. Gerald nodded. At the same time, in an office building in Sacramento, there was a huge conference room. 20 to 30 people were sitting in the conference room. Henley was also among them. However, she sat at the back of the table. The people sitting in this conference room were the mainstays of the Kenneth family or some of the upper echelons of the Zumthor family's companies. In the main seat, there was an old man sitting in a wheelchair. Even though he was sitting in a wheelchair, he still had a sense of dignity. Next to him stood a middle-aged man. The man looked dignified, and he was the current leader of the Zumthor family. He was also Henley's father, Corbin Zumthor. His gaze slowly swept over everyone. Then there came a sound. He slammed a document on the table and looked around at everyone. All of you think carefully about who offended Leandro, that bastard. And who offended the people from New Bank. Think about it now. All 5 of our big projects have been taken away by Universe Group. We can't accept the price they offered. Moreover, the new bank has suddenly terminated cooperation with us. He glared and roared, do you know how much we will lose? Below, Henley's expression suddenly changed. The news came too suddenly. Of course, Henley did not think about how much damage this would bring to his family. He was thinking now that such a huge change had occurred in his family business, would his engagement party with Doreen be able to proceed smoothly tomorrow? As for the crisis that his family had encountered, he believed that his family would definitely be able to survive. Henley did not expect that the one who brought such a huge crisis to his family was himself. At this time, a person stood up and said, I'll ask the people inside New Bank about it. The manager of New Bank is called Kiera. She just transferred from Los Angeles. The one who proposed to terminate our cooperation is a diamond card user of New Bank. But he did not show up. I don't know who it is. Kiera. How could it be her? When Henley heard this, his face changed slightly. Corbin looked at him and asked, do you know her? She is Doreen's best friend. Henley quickly said. When Henley said this, everyone in the conference room looked at him. Corbin said, so Kiera worked in Los Angeles, and then she suddenly came to Sacramento. Then she represented a diamond card user of New Bank to ask New Bank to terminate its cooperation with us. As Corbin spoke, his face darkened. He looked at Henley and asked, in Los Angeles, who did you offend? Henley's face suddenly became blank. When Henley was in Los Angeles, he was either with Doreen or with Fletcher picking up girls. How could Henley offend anyone? If there was someone Henley had offended, it should be Gerald. However, Henley did not think that Gerald would have a diamond card from New Bank. Henley dug up the background of Gerald there. Gerald only worked at a construction site. Later, even if Bradley had a good impression of Gerald and asked Gerald to work under him, Gerald was just a worker. How could Gerald have a diamond card from New Bank? Even Henley or the Zumthor family didn't have such a bank card. I didn't offend anyone. At most, I offended a guy from the Kenneth family. His name is Gerald, the one who raped Bree, Henley quickly said. Corbin frowned deeply. Corbin knew this person. After Henley came back, Henley had mentioned Gerald before. While eating with Corbin, when Henley mentioned Gerald, they also treated it as a joke. Corbin also knew that Gerald was from a branch family of the Kenneth family. It was impossible for Gerald to have something like a diamond card from New Bank. Corbin slowly sighed and said, think carefully. If you can't, find Kiera and ask her who is targeting us. In this respect, money is not a problem. If you can bribe her, then just do it. As Corbin spoke, he looked around at everyone and said, New Bank has terminated the cooperation. Although there may be a Temporary money shortage, we should be able to fill it up. The most important thing is what is going on with Universe Group. These 5 projects are one of our key projects this year. It looks like Universe Group is determined to fight against us till the last second. Even if they take on these projects, they won't be able to earn money at all. Think about it, who offended Leandro? This time, everyone was at a loss. After a while, there was no result in the meeting. In the end, the meeting had to end. When the meeting was over and almost everyone had left, Henley quickly leaned over and asked, "Dad, what about the engagement party between Doreen and me? Tomorrow night." Corbin looked at Henley and frowned. "Let's talk about it tomorrow." Henley's complexion suddenly changed. His expression became cloudy. On Phoenix Road, it was in a seafood restaurant. At this time, the food has already been served. Gerald was chatting with Jessica as he ate the food with large gulps. Ads by Pub Future. After eating for a while, probably it was hot, Daphne's face was somewhat red. She looked at Gerald and said, "Gerald, your figure seems to be good." Gerald looked at Daphne in surprise, coughed, and said, "It's not good to say this in front of your mother." When Jessica heard Gerald's words, her face was slightly red, and she glared at Daphne. Daphne's face was even redder, and she hurriedly said, "Don't misunderstand, I mean, I want to ask you to be the human model of my friend and me." Gerald didn't know what to say. When Jessica heard this, her face relaxed slightly. She looked at Gerald and said, "Why don't you think about it?" "Well, okay, just call me when you need me. I should be free." Gerald scratched his head and said, "That's a deal. I'll call you another day," Daphne said with a happy face. At this time, Jessica looked at Gerald and said, "By the way, do you have a job?" Gerald was stunned for a moment. He suddenly thought of a problem. Now Gerald was back, and Universe Group was Gerald's business, but Gerald could not tell his parents about it. Besides, as for his identity as a watchman, Gerald could not tell his parents either. If Gerald's parents knew that he was wandering outside every day, they would definitely say that he was a chair warmer. His relatives would definitely gabble about it and gossip about his parents. Therefore, Gerald thought he needed to have a job in Universe Group. "I work at Universe Group," Gerald said with a smile. Jessica looked at Gerald in surprise. "Universe Group, that is a big company." "I'm lucky," Gerald said with a smile. They did not notice that while they were talking, not far away, Justin was holding a pot of juice. With a sinister smile on his face, he passed by Gerald. When Justin passed by Gerald's side, he pretended to stagger, and his entire body fell towards Gerald's side. At the same time, the juice in Justin's cup rippled out in an instant and directly fell toward Gerald. "Be careful," Daphne exclaimed. At this time, Gerald, who was originally sitting, got up at an extremely fast speed and moved 2 steps to the side. And at the same time, Gerald's foot gently hooked Justin's leg. Justin, who had been pretending to fall, lost his balance at that moment and threw himself into the chair. Bang! Justin's head smashed into the chair, and the chair slid away. Justin continued to fall to the ground. Crash! The glass bottle filled with juice in Justin's hand cracked, and the glass shards were embedded in Justin's right hand. Justin also, smiling face casual date is just a click away, fell to the ground. Ah! The pain in Justin's hand made him scream. Opposite Gerald, Jessica, and her daughter were shocked. Just now, they did not even see how Gerald left his seat. "Ah, Justin, are you alright?" Seeing Justin throw himself on the ground with blood flowing from his hands, Gerald squatted down and pretended to be concerned. Not far away, Tyrone, who was watching the show, had a change in expression. Justin had discussed it with Tyrone. Tyrone knew that Justin could not really fall down. Justin pretended to fall down just to pour juice on Gerald. Now that Justin suddenly fell to the ground, It must have been Gerald who had done something. Tyrone hurriedly rushed over and helped Justin up while scolding Gerald. Gerald, it's you who did this. You actually dared to hurt Justin. You are done. Many people around looked over. With the help of Tyrone, Justin slowly got up. However, Justin looked extremely miserable right now. The juice spilled all over Justin's body. On Justin's right hand, there were a few pieces of glass embedded in his hand. The intense pain caused Justin's facial expression to be somewhat distorted. Justin looked at Gerald and said, Gerald, you dare fucking trick me. Gerald looked at him, then smiled and said, why did you say so? You fell down on your own, and I dodged. Why did you say I tricked you? You are the young master of the Kenneth family in Sacramento, who dares to do anything to you? Tyrone was anxious and hurriedly said, bullshit. Justin just pretended to fall in. Wanted to splash the juice on you. It is impossible for him to fall directly to the ground. After Tyrone finished speaking, he regretted it, because the gazes of the people around him were a little strange. Oh. Gerald touched his nose and said, so you guys pretended to fall down. And I shouldn't avoid it. I should let him pour juice on me. I dodged. So I am guilty, right? Do you think you can do whatever you want with money? In the crowd, some people couldn't stand it anymore. This is too much. I have long heard that the second young master of the Kenneth family is an idiot. Today, I saw that he is indeed so. Truly shameless. Hearing the words coming from the crowd, Justin turned gloomy. Others might not know, but Justin knew very well that the reason he fell was that Gerald had kicked him. The intense pain in Justin's hand caused his face to twist. Justin stared fixedly at Gerald and gritted his teeth. Gerald, I'll remember this. Gerald shrugged indifferently. I'll give you a word. Remember, if you don't seek death, you won't die. Do you understand? Looking at Gerald's appearance, Justin trembled with anger. What's wrong? At this time, a voice sounded behind them. Gerald turned around and saw a beautiful woman in her 20s. Walking over. After seeing Justin, she revealed a concerned expression and said, Justin, what happened to your hand? As the woman spoke, she reached out to support Justin. At this time, Gerald's eyes slightly moved. On the woman's wrist, Gerald saw a blood lotus tattoo. Looking at the tattoo on the wrist of the woman in front of him, Gerald began to size up this woman's appearance. This woman looked to be in her 30s. She looked beautiful, and she had a cold aura around her. However, compared to a top beauty like Audrey, this woman had a huge gap between Audrey. Her figure was slightly chubby, and was the best for many men. Is Blood Lotus planning to attack the Kenneth family? Gerald smiled. Gerald glanced at Justin again. Justin obviously didn't know about this. Justin was still chatting with this woman. This guy, he probably would help this woman count money even if he was sold. Hey, what happened to your hand? Who did it to you? The woman held Justin's hand, and her whole body was about to stick to Justin. Justin's face looked terrible. The sounds of discussion around him made him a little embarrassed. Justin's eyes glued on Gerald for a moment, and then he said, let's go. Take me to the hospital. Tyrone quickly helped Justin to walk out the door. Before leaving, Tyrone glared at Gerald and said, you are done. Gerald shrugged his shoulders and said, what? You are used to being a follower like a dog by Justin's side. Are you planning to bite me to death? This handsome guy, how can you say that? The plump woman looked at Gerald. The pain in Justin's hand was unbearable. Justin quickly said, don't argue with him for now. I will settle this account later. Send me to the hospital first. I can't stand the pain anymore. Tyrone glared at Gerald and then helped Justin out. The service of the waiters at the seafood restaurant was very considerate. They hurriedly ran over and began to clean up the ground. After cleaning up, Gerald sat down. Daphne looked at Gerald, gave him a thumbs up, and said, Gerald, well done. I have long disliked Justin. He has been arrogant all the time just because he was born rich. Next, Jessica frowned and said, "But Gerald, you have offended him." In the future, in Sacramento, Gerald waved his hand and said, "I want to prove my innocence. Sooner or later, I will offend the Kenneth family. It doesn't matter." Hearing Gerald say this, Jessica did not continue to say anything. Gerald helped Jessica once. Jessica recognized Gerald as a good guy and was willing to interact with him. Jessica could help Gerald as much as she could. However, because Gerald had completely offended the Kenneth family, Jessica still had some concerns. After dinner, they said goodbye to each other and Gerald went straight home. Ads by Pub Future. Gerald took out the key and opened the door. When he entered the house, he found that there were several more people in the house. Gerald's Aunt Lilia, cousin Jolie, and a strange young boy were all at his house, sitting at the table and eating. Jolie was 5 years younger than Gerald. When Jolie was a child, she liked to play with Gerald. However, at this time, she looked at Gerald with a hint of disgust. Jolie glanced at Gerald and continued to eat. Gerald laughed bitterly in his heart. Indeed, not everyone could be like Jacob, who had no prejudice against Gerald, including the people who were very close to Gerald. "Did you have dinner?" Seeing Gerald return, Yasmin hurriedly asked. Gerald nodded and said, "Yes, I just finished dinner with my friend." Lilia frowned. "Gerald, you just came out. How can you be outside all day long? Don't go out and hang out with those shady people." "I didn't." Gerald touched his nose and said, "There is a reunion today. I played with my previous classmate." Lilia put down the fork and frowned. "Gerald, you are not a kid anymore. You are 27. Now, don't blame me for being nosy. You know your own situation. Most of your classmates have got married and have successful careers. You have committed rape and have just come back now. You don't have a job. You should hurry up and find a job. Which woman will be willing to be with you in the future? Your dad's salary is high, but he can't support you for a lifetime." Gerald frowned and said, "I know what I should do. If you do, you wouldn't have committed a crime in the beginning." Jolie snorted from the side. Lilia coughed dryly, then looked at Gerald and said, "The words are a bit unpleasant, but it is also for your own good. Come on, Gerald, let me introduce you. This is Jolie's boyfriend, Drake Grandison. He is only 26 years old, but he started out from scratch and has a game company. Now he is worth several $1 million. Gerald understood why they came here. Lilia came to visit Gerald. Gerald heard it at Lilia's door, but now it seemed that Lilia did not deliberately come to visit him. Instead, she came to show off that she had found a very good future son-in-law. Drake looked at Gerald and nodded slightly as a greeting. Then Drake said, "Mason, this time, besides going with Jolie and the others to see you, I also want to discuss something with you." Mason looked at Drake and said, "What's the matter?" "I heard Lilia talk about Gerald. With Gerald's current situation, it will be difficult for him to find a job outside. He can't hide his history in prison on his resume," said Drake. Mason and Yasmin looked at each other. In fact, after Gerald came back, this was also what they were most worried about. In the past, they thought that Gerald would never be able to get out of prison for the rest of his life. Now that Gerald finally came back, they were worried about the problem of Gerald working and getting married in the future. As parents, it had always been like this. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. I can hide Gerald's resume in the company. It is my own company. There must be no problem, Drake said. And when the time comes, Lilia will introduce a girl to Gerald. Lilia nodded. "Yes, my colleague has a daughter. Her appearance is pretty good. Although Gerald went to jail before, Mason's income is very high. If your couple can support Gerald, he will be very competitive. She is willing to meet Gerald." Mason and his wife's eyes lit up slightly. However, Mason had experienced a lot. He looked at Drake and asked, "Then what do you need me to do? How should I put it? I want to build a relatively large game and get the investment of Universe Group. Or to say, cooperate with Universe Group." Drake calmly said, "And Mason, you are the vice president of Universe Group." Beside him, Gerald was speechless. The boss of Universe Group was here. Mason pursed his lips and said, "Although I have never done anything in Universe Group and do not care about the personnel changes, Leandro and the others are very polite to me. As long as what you say is true, I will tell this to Mr. Hansen. However, I cannot guarantee that they will agree." Drake's eyes lit up slightly. At this time, Lilia hurriedly said, "Gerald, why are you still cold? Hurry up and thank Drake." Gerald sneered. Not to mention that he was unwilling to accept their invitation, even if he said yes, it was Drake who should be grateful to him. If Drake got the investment of Universe Group, Gerald's salary was nothing at all. Gerald shook his head and said, "Forget it, Dad. You don't care about anything in Universe Group. You don't need to trouble yourself because of me." Drake frowned. Next to him, Jolie's face darkened slightly. She looked at Gerald and said, "You don't know how to appreciate favors. I have a job." Gerald touched his nose and said, "Huh." Jolie sneered, "What are you doing? Going to work at a construction site? Or going to the bar as security staff?" Gerald sighed. After 9 years, the little girl who had wandered around behind Gerald grown up, Jolie didn't show any respect to Gerald in her words. Had Gerald looked at Jolie and said calmly, "I work at Universe Group." As soon as Gerald finished speaking, everyone had a blank look on their faces. Then, Lilia looked at Mason and sneered. "Mason, what did you tell me back then? I asked you to help Jolie get a job at Universe Group. You refused and said you had no right in Universe Group. Now, it's your own son's turn. Even though he committed the crime of rape, you can still get a job for him. How can you do this?" Mason looked at Gerald in shock. He did not know this at all. Otherwise, Mason would not have been so happy when he heard that Drake was willing to let Gerald go to work. "Lilia, you can't say that. I really don't know about this," Mason hurriedly explained. Mason looked at Gerald and asked suspiciously, "Really? What's your job?" This time, Gerald didn't know how to reply. Gerald did not know much about the company positions. The industries in his hands were handed over to others to manage. Gerald was only the shopkeeper of the business. Looking into everyone's eyes, Gerald touched his nose and said, "Mr. Hansen's assistant." As Gerald's voice fell, everyone was stunned again. After a short moment of astonishment, Jolie sneered and said, "Gerald, we haven't seen each other for 9 years, but you still like to brag. With Mr. Hansen's identity, why would he want a rapist like you to be his assistant?" If other people called Gerald a rapist, Gerald didn't care, but when Jolie kept calling him that, he felt a little uncomfortable and a little unhappy. Gerald shrugged and said, "Why don't you ask my dad to call and ask?" Hearing Gerald's words, Lilia, Jolie, and Drake all looked at Mason's blank face. They all had suspicious expressions on their faces. Mason did not seem to be acting but did not know it all beforehand. Mason gritted his teeth, then took out his phone, and dialed Leandro. Soon, the phone was connected. Leandro asked, "Hello, Mason, what's wrong?" Leandro was 2 years older than Mason. Mason quickly said, "Mr. Hansen, you know Gerald, right? He said now he works in our company and he is your assistant. Is that true?" Leandro had experienced too much, whether in the business industry or the battlefield. Hearing Mason's words, he instantly knew that Gerald wanted to find a job to reassure his parents. So he hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, he is my assistant now." "What's wrong? Are you not satisfied?" I can promote him if you are not satisfied with this position. No, I am very satisfied. Mason's voice was a little swallowed. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Gerald, who was beside Mason, was speechless and said, there is no need to thank him. The company is mine. After hanging up the phone, Mason looked at Yasmin, and they showed a look of ecstasy. They had always been worried that Gerald could not find a job. But now Gerald found a job in Universe Group. They thought, Gerald is Leandro's assistant now. Gerald could learn a lot from Leandro, who is an excellent entrepreneur. Thinking of this, Mason and Yasmin were both excited. In comparison, Lilia, Jolie, and Drake looked sullen. They were in disbelief. They thought, why would Leandro accept such a person who had been in prison as his assistant? Seeing his parents were joyful, Gerald touched his nose. With this job, he could let his parents be relieved. What exactly happened? How did you become Mr. Hanson's assistant? Mason asked. I went to the interview with Jacob, and then Mr. Hanson happened to pass by. He thought I was a good person, so he let me be his assistant. Gerald randomly said a reason. After hearing this, Lilia looked a little uncomfortable. She looked at Gerald, then looked at Mason and said, Mason, about the cooperation between Drake and your company. Without waiting for Mason to speak, Gerald said, excuse me for being blunt. Your company is small. I'm afraid that Universe Group will not accept cooperating with your company. If you really want Universe Group to invest in your company, I'm afraid that Smiling Face Casual Date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Ads by Pub Future. It is an investment of the nature of the acquisition. At this time, Jolie sneered and said, you don't have the right to make the decision for Universe Group. Drake's company is small, but it is set up by him bit by bit. Gerald was too lazy to argue with Jolie. He calmly looked at Drake and said, if you can accept the acquisition, Universe Group may consider the cooperation. Of course, the premise is that your game project can make Universe Group interested. If the game project can't pass the evaluation of Universe Group, it is estimated that it is difficult to get an investment. Drake frowned, looked at Gerald, and said, are you the decider of Universe Group? Gerald shrugged his shoulders and said, it's just a suggestion. It's your business whether you listen or not. You can treat it like I'm talking nonsense. You are indeed talking nonsense, Jolie quickly said. Gerald frowned and glanced at her. Then, he said, Mom, Dad, you stay with them. I'm going back to my room to sleep. After that, without waiting for his parents to agree, Gerald walked directly to his room. Gerald thought, they came here to ask my father to help them, but they looked high and mighty as if our family had taken advantage of them. In particular, Jolie's hostility towards Gerald made him very unhappy. He didn't want to talk with them anymore. Seeing that Gerald ignored them and returned to his room, Lilia sneered and said, you have bad manners now. It must be because you had been in prison for so many years. Mason frowned and said, can you not keep talking that I am a criminal and have been in prison? Seeing that Mason seemed to be a little angry, Lilia smiled awkwardly and did not speak. Gerald lay on his bed and took out his phone to play. During this time, after finishing the meal, Lilia, Jolie, and Drake left. Before they left, Yasmin kept asking Lilia about the girl she mentioned. Yasmin seemed to be in a hurry to get Gerald married. Gerald had a headache when he heard this in the room. Gerald played on his phone until it was past 11 o'clock and then fell into a deep sleep. In another place in Sacramento, outside a villa, Kiri held a briefcase and pressed the doorbell at the door of the villa. Soon, an impatient voice sounded. I'm coming. Soon, the door opened. A middle-aged man wearing a nightgown stood at the door. When he saw Kiri, a hint of impatience flashed across his face. He said, what's the matter? Kiri was about to speak. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. The middle-aged man waved his hand impatiently and said, "You need to pass the performance assessment by yourself this time. Don't think about asking me to help you every time." Damn it, back then, this company developed very well under Mason's management. But now, in your 3 years of management, it almost went bankrupt. Mr. Kenneth, Carey quickly said, "I will pass the performance assessment by myself." "Then what are you doing here?" Stephen frowned and asked. "Gerald is back," Carey said hurriedly. Stephen was stunned for a moment. "Then," he said impatiently, "he can't change anything even if he is back." Carey said, "After all, I asked the Kenneth family to kick them out of the family. I was afraid that he would take revenge on me. I met him that day. His gaze was too scary. I have been staying in a hotel these days. My wife and children have been sent back to my hometown. I feel uneasy." Stephen was speechless and said, "That's your business. Don't bother me. Back then, you asked me to give the suggestion to the Kenneth family." Carey frowned and asked. At that moment, a sweet voice came from the house. "Darling, what are you doing? I have been waiting for you for a long time." Stephen frowned. Then he looked at Carey and said, "Humph. What can he do? If he dares to look for you, you can just find someone to beat him to death. If something happens, I will take responsibility. If you are scared, just tell him that I asked you to suggest to the Kenneth family to kick him out." After he finished speaking, his eyes turned cold as he said, "Other than that, if you dare to say anything, I will kill you." Carey trembled and said, "I only know this. I don't know anything else. It's good that you understand." After Stephen finished speaking, he suddenly closed the door. At the same time, on the other side of Sacramento, Doreen was lying on the bed. She was reading a message, and her face was filled with disbelief. "Cancel Doreen's engagement party tomorrow. The exact date will be informed later." Doreen saw this news from her family line group. The party was really cancelled. Doreen was shocked, and Gerald's appearance appeared in her mind. She didn't know how Gerald did it, but she was very clear that all of this was related to Gerald. The night was silent. The next day, Gerald woke up around 9 in the morning. He stretched and took the phone beside the bed. He found that there were 2 messages on the phone. One was from Doreen. "The engagement party has been cancelled. Thank you." Gerald smiled and checked the other message. The second message was from Red Rose. "Birdman has already brought Irene and the other 2 to Sacramento. Now they are in a country mansion at No. 79 Marshall City Road." Seeing this message, Gerald smiled, revealing a hint of excitement. Gerald's eyes moved slightly. He was a little hesitant. He did not know if Red Rose was lying to him. In fact, he did not believe in Red Rose even now. It was possible that Red Rose had discovered him and wanted to get rid of him, so she only pretended to cooperate. And this place might be a trap for him set up by Red Rose. Gerald hesitated for a moment, but still chose to go. He still had to get those 2 swords back and try to save Irene and Mary. Even though they didn't treat him well in the past 3 years, Shelton had saved his life, so he would like to pay back by saving their lives. He got up and washed up, as he thought about Birdman, a killer of Blood Lotus. Birdman ranked 19th in the underground killers. He was called Birdman because he liked to raise birds and go everywhere with a bird cage by his side. Moreover, he often left a bird on site after the assassination. In Gerald's opinion, those who ranked among the top underground killers were all perverts. For example, Red Rose's private life was a bit chaotic. She liked the man who rejected her, and the more unwilling the man was, the more excited she became. Birdman was also a strange person. The legendary killer who ranked first on the killer list also had a fetish. After greeting his parents, Gerald went out. He called someone after going downstairs. "Hello. Valerie was the one he called, who picked up the phone and asked, "What's the matter?" "Birdman kidnapped Irene and Mary, and he had two of my swords which I am going to take back." Gerald continued to say, "It was Red Rose who told me the address. I'm worried that it's a trap. Tell Night Watch in Sacramento that the address is No. 79, Marshall City Road. If I don't come out before 11 o'clock, ask them to break in. If I do come out, then they should go inside to clean up the mess." Valerie's expression changed slightly. "Don't be impulsive. Red Rose is likely to pretend to be on your side. If this is their trap, if it is them who set up the trap, it is perfect to finish them off." Gerald licked his lips and said, "Well, forget it. I can't persuade you not to go there. If there is any danger, remember to evacuate as soon as possible. Then we will think of a plan B later," Valerie said. Gerald nodded and hung up the phone. Gerald smiled. "I didn't want to have anything to do with Irene and Mary anymore. Alas, this is unavoidable." He shook his head and walked towards the door. Smiling face, casual date is just a click away. Ads by Pub Future. As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the community, he frowned slightly. He found that several people around were looking at him. Gerald looked at them a few times, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. A car was parked not far away, and through the windshield, he saw Tyrone sitting inside. "It seems that Justin hasn't suffered enough. He actually dares to block the entrance of my community." Gerald touched his nose. If it wasn't that he had something else to do, he wouldn't mind playing with these people. He glanced at them and speeded up his steps. They hurriedly followed, but how could they keep up with Gerald? A few minutes later, Gerald shook them off, took a taxi, and rushed to the destination. In Kiera's home in Sacramento, Kiera, Audrey, and Hazel were sitting on the sofa. Audrey's eyes lit up and she said, "Doreen and Henley's engagement banquet has been postponed." Hazel revealed a smile and said, "I really hope that it can be cancelled directly. Henley doesn't deserve Doreen at all." Beside her, Kiera only smiled slightly. She clearly knew that all of this had something to do with Gerald. However, Gerald did not want others to know, so she didn't tell them. At this time, Kiera's phone rang. When she saw who was calling, she frowned slightly. It was Henley. In fact, Henley had been calling her since last night, but she had never answered. Seeing the call, she smiled bitterly and answered the call. As soon as the call was connected, Henley sneered and said, "Kiera, aren't you amazing? You don't even pick up my phone. You have to know that this is Sacramento, and your parents are in the city." Kiera frowned. Henley said impatiently, "Who is against our family? This involves the privacy of my client. I can't tell you." Kiera pursed her lips and said, "Is that so?" Henley sneered and said, "You are so stubborn. I hope you can keep your stubbornness when your parents are in trouble." Kiera's expression changed slightly. Still not willing to say, Henley said coldly, "All right, Kiera, I will give you a lesson." After the word, he directly hung up the phone. Kiera's face instantly showed a worried expression. Audrey noticed the change in her expression and hurriedly asked, "Kiera, what's the matter?" "It's fine." Kiera put away her emotions and said with a smile, "Where are we going today?" Audrey pouted and said, "Let's go pack up and call Gerald. I want to ask him to have lunch together and then go out together. He is so rich. I think he would pay for our day." Kiera and Hazel's eyes lit up and they said, "Good idea." "Hey, what does he do? I never know much about him. He is really mysterious," Audrey mumbled. Kiera and Hazel nodded. In fact, they were also curious about Gerald. Gerald's car stopped at Marshall City Road, which was a thinly populated rural area in Sacramento. Most of the buildings here were short, mostly villas or country mansions. Although they were in the suburbs, they were quite expensive. As a golden card assassin of Blood Lotus, it was quite easy for him to buy a house here. Gerald put his hands in his pockets and swaggered towards No. 79 Marshall City Road. Soon, he noticed the house number 79. It was a country mansion, the door of which was closed. Gerald walked directly to the door and knocked on it. Coming. A pleasant voice sounded in the mansion. Soon, the door opened with a creak. A plump woman walked out from behind the door. The moment she saw Gerald, she suddenly frowned and said, "It's you." Gerald was slightly surprised since he recognized that she was the one with Justin last night. Of course, it didn't shock Gerald too much. After all, there was a golden card assassin of Blood Lotus in this mansion. "If I remember correctly, your name is Gerald, right?" The plump woman looked at Gerald and said with a forced smile, "Yesterday, Justin said that he would teach you a lesson and make you feel worse than death in Sacramento." At this point, she frowned and said, "What are you doing here?" Gerald raised his head and revealed a bright smile. "I dropped something in your mansion. I came here to get it. What you want is not here." The plump woman said and was about to close the door. "I saw it here. You have to let me go in and find it," Gerald said. At this point, a scream suddenly came from the mansion. This voice was very familiar to Gerald. It was Mary. In the past 3 years, that high-pitched tone often sounded in Gerald's ears. "Boy." The plump woman looked at Gerald and said, "If you don't leave now, I will call Justin. You caused him to be injured yesterday. If he knows that you are here, I'm afraid he will beat you to death." Gerald did not have the intention of leaving. He said indifferently, "I lost 2 swords here. One is called Void Breaking, and the other is called Nameless." "Huh." The plump woman's expression changed slightly. Then, her pupils rapidly widened. She looked at Gerald in shock and said, You are actually a night watchman? No." The moment she finished speaking, she discovered that Gerald's smile was approaching from afar. In almost an instant, he was already in front of her. In a room in the country mansion, Irene and the other 2 women were huddled together. Their hair was disheveled, and their faces were full of horror. Squeak, squeak. In front of them, there was a bird cage on the ground. A bird of unknown species was in the cage. It had broken wings and was squeaking. But at this time, the squeaks sounded a bit creepy. Next to the bird cage, a middle-aged man wearing a coat was holding a long saber that was more than 4 feet. It was pointing at the ground and glinting. "Nameless." Birdman grinned and said, "Do you know the story behind this saber's name?" He looked at the 3 women in front of him. Irene and the other 2 would never be able to get over what happened today. Every time this man smiled, it horrified them. They were shrouded in fear the entire time. They felt that this psycho would kill them at any time. "You are not answering." Birdman smiled and said, "Then let me tell you. It is because the owner of the saber rarely used it. When he used it, it was always to kill very, very powerful people. This saber does not kill nameless people, hence the name." As he spoke, he slowly raised the tip of the saber until it was pointing to Mary's neck. Mary was terrified. She couldn't help but scream, "Don't kill me. Don't. We really have nothing to do with Gerald. We tried to sell the saber only because we wanted money. Trust me." "Here." Birdman sneered. Then, he said with a smile, "Don't worry. I won't kill you. Didn't you keep saying on the way here that you hate Gerald? When he finds us, I will kill him for you. How do you like that?" The 3 women dared not to speak. They just clung to the corner, trembling. And Irene's face was covered with tears. Since she divorced Gerald, she had been down on luck. When she was with Gerald, she wasn't rich, but she had everything she needed. She made about $3,200 a month, which was a pretty satisfying number in Los Angeles. But after the divorce, bad things kept happening to her. Gerald, who was supposed to be a loser, suddenly became a rich man. And the rich guy she hooked up with broke up with her. And now, her life was in danger. Don't worry, you won't die. After all, these two women are quite beautiful. After I take care of Gerald, I will send you to Sin City. The people there love new faces. As he spoke, he licked his lips, then squatted down and played with the bird. Ads by Pub Future. Suddenly, his pupils contracted slightly. He looked outside the door and smiled. He's here. Bang. In the next instant, a figure flew in from the outside. The door was broken open, and the figure fell on the ground heavily. Poof! The one who landed on the ground was the plump woman at the door. She fell to the ground and spat blood. Ah! Irene and the other two could not help but scream again. Then Gerald walked in. He narrowed his eyes and looked around the room. His gaze slowly swept over Irene and the other two. Then it fell on Birdman and then on the long saber in his hand. Gerald frowned. As expected of the former watchman number 0. You were actually given 3 days. But you find us shortly after we arrived in Sacramento. Birdman stood up, sheathed his long saber, and then lifted the birdcage off the ground. Gerald touched his nose, looked at Birdman with disdain, and asked indifferently, "Tell me, how do you want to die?" In the corner, the 3 women felt hopeful the moment they saw Gerald. Irene's tears flowed down, and despite the fact that she had mistreated Gerald for 3 years, Mary shouted, "Gerald, help! Save us!" Gerald frowned. He only glanced at them before he looked back at Birdman. Clap. Birdman clapped his hands and said, as expected of the former watchman number 0. So confident and arrogant. Then Birdman narrowed his eyes and added, "Have you never wondered why I, who only rank 19th on the killer list, would dare to provoke you and let you find me?" Gerald touched his nose and said, "Not interested." With that, Gerald didn't want to waste more time. His feet moved, and he rushed up to Birdman like an arrow. Then Gerald clenched his vein-bulging right hand and threw it straight at Birdman's forehead. Gerald would not be lenient with people from Blood Lotus. Birdman's expression changed. He suddenly stomped with both feet, trying to dodge. Bang! Just then, Gerald was swinging his leg at him. Birdman failed to dodge. He was thrown into a pillar next to him, then he bounced off and fell to the ground. So fast. Birdman spat blood and struggled up from the ground. He said with a ferocious expression, "No wonder the leader didn't dare to show himself. You're good." Then Birdman shouted towards the outside, "Red Rose, it's time to come out." Gerald's expression changed slightly. At the same time, they heard the sounds of high smiling face. Casual date is just a click away. Heels. Click, clack. Immediately after, a fiery red figure appeared at the door. She had a sexy body and a beautiful face. She stood at the door, leaning against the wall. She looked at Birdman with a smile and said, "Ah, you look so miserable." Birdman's expression changed slightly. "Why are you alone? Where are the others? I've asked them to leave." Red Rose covered her mouth and said with a chuckle. Birdman's expression changed slightly. He looked at Red Rose and said, "Are you crazy? The man we're dealing with used to be Watchman No." Red Rose smiled wider. She looked at Birdman with amusement in her eyes and said, "Silly, can't you tell? I'm with him." Birdman was stunned. What he heard blew his mind. Suddenly, everything clicked for him. He finally knew why Gerald found him so quickly when he had just arrived in Sacramento last night. It turned out that Red Rose had leaked his whereabouts to Gerald. Gerald looked at Red Rose and let down his guard a little. In fact, Gerald was quite worried when he came. He was afraid that this was a trap set up by Red Rose and Blood Lotus. But now it seemed that his worry was unnecessary. "Red Rose, are you crazy? If you do this, the leader will punish you." Cold sweat flowed down from Birdman's forehead. "Franklin doesn't even dare to come out. He only dares to hide. Why should I be afraid of him?" Red Rose said. "Then they will punish you." Birdman spoke again. Gerald took a breath out. He needed no more nonsense from Birdman. Gerald once again rushed up to Birdman. At the same time, when he passed by the table in the center, he touched the two knives on the table. Then the shorter one instantly flew out of the sheath. Clang! The knife instantly cut Birdman's throat. Blood flowed out of his neck. Ah! Ah! Mary and the other two had never seen such a scene before. Gerald, who had been their doormat for 3 years, had actually killed a man in front of them. In the seemingly peaceful era, most people had only seen killings on TV. But now they were seeing it happening in real life. The three had been on tenterhooks all day and were too weak for the scene, so they broke down instantly. Birdman collapsed to the ground. And in the bird cage next to him, the bird flapped its wings agitatedly. Gerald ignored them and sheathed his saber. Then he looked at Red Rose and said, "You can leave now. The night watch is coming." In the room, after a short scream, Mary and the other two trembled even more. They looked at Gerald with eyes full of fear. This was murder. Mary and the other two saw it happen with their own eyes. In their eyes, Gerald was completely different from the one they knew. As far as they knew, Gerald was a weak man. He was submissive to them and did not even dare to speak loudly. Even though Gerald became rich later on, he would at most be a bit tougher in front of them. However, at that moment, Gerald was decisive, and his eyes were cold. After killing someone, he was extremely calm. Obviously, this was not the first time he had done such a thing. Thinking of the past, the three could not help but tremble. They were worried that Gerald would stab them with the knife the next moment. Obviously, they were thinking too much. Gerald was not interested. He just looked at Red Rose. Red Rose said with amazement in her beautiful eyes, "TSK, you deserve to be the former watchman no. 0. Even though I saw your fight once 3 years ago, I think you are amazing while fighting. In the battle 3 years ago, Night Watch lost 3 of the top 10 watchmen. 1 died on the spot, and 2 disappeared. Red Rose was also one of the participants in that battle. At that time, Blood Lotus almost went out in full force. Even so, she only made Gerald and Watchman No. 2 disappear." Gerald smiled and looked at Red Rose. He said, "Go. Watchmen are coming." Red Rose pursed her lips and looked at Irene and the others. She asked, "What about your ex-wife and the others?" "I promise that they will call the police as soon as they go out. This is my business," Gerald said lightly. "All right." Red Rose grinned and said, "I will continue to trick Franklin out. If there is any news, I will inform you as soon as possible." After that, Red Rose turned around and twisted her body, leaving a moving back to Gerald and the other 3 people. Gerald looked at his watch. There were more than 20 minutes left before the 11 o'clock agreement with Valerie. He let out a breath and sat down in front of the table. He glanced at Irene and the other 2 trembling people. He did not speak or leave. Ads by Pub Future. However, Gerald was holding 2 knives in his hands, and there was a hint of longing on his face. When Irene and the other 2 saw that Gerald had no intention of taking revenge on them, they slowly calmed down. "Gerald." After a while, Irene gritted her teeth and gathered her courage to say, "Who exactly are you?" Gerald turned his head and looked at her. He said nothing. The aftermath was not only the handling of the corpses but also the handling of Irene and the other 2. Gerald left all things to watchmen who would come later. Those watchmen would think of a way to stabilize the emotions of the 3 and to shut their mouths, just like Bradley, whom Gerald had saved. "You are here to save us, aren't you?" Irene asked again. Gerald put down his knives, looked at Irene and the other 2, and then said calmly, "You can say so. Shelton once saved me. I don't like owing people favors. Now I have completely paid it off." Vivian curled up in Irene's arms, and Vivian's hair was a little messy. Beside her, Mary looked at Gerald and gnashed her teeth. Mary felt that everything that happened today was caused by Gerald. However, Mary did not dare to speak ill of Gerald like before. The scene of Gerald killing someone just now was like a martial arts movie. For Mary, it was terrifying. Irene wanted to ask a lot of questions, such as who Gerald was, why he was in Los Angeles, or if they could get remarried. But for a moment, Irene's mind was a bit messy, and she did not know where to start. Gerald had no intention of paying attention to them at all. He just sat there. No one knew what he was waiting for. Can we leave? After a while, Vivian asked weakly. This was completely different from before. Back then, when she faced Gerald, she was always aloof and had a look of disdain. Not now, Gerald said calmly and did not look at them. Only when Gerald returned his life did he completely draw a clear line between himself and Irene's family. Clank. There was a sound of footsteps outside the door. Gerald looked at his watch. It was 10 minutes earlier than he expected. Then, a group of about a dozen people rushed into the country mansion and headed straight over. They were all dressed like ordinary people. The person at the head was a middle-aged man in a suit. When he walked into the room and saw the plump woman and Birdman on the ground, he frowned and said, "Why did you kill them all? Can't you leave one alive?" Gerald looked at him. After that, the man smiled and walked to Gerald. He hugged Gerald and said, "Gerald." Gerald also laughed and said, "Captain." This man was Gerald's former captain, named Dennis Graham. He was watchman No. 13. Dennis let go of Gerald and frowned. "These three are your ex-wife, ex-mother-in-law, and ex-sister-in-law." Gerald smiled bitterly. "It seems that Dr. Manning has told you everything. Ah, all watchmen talk about you now. They said that the mother and the daughter are so stupid they lose a rich man like you." Dennis laughed. Dennis looked at Mary and Irene and said happily, "Miss, do you know how wealthy and capable Gerald is? He is the most awesome person in the world. He followed me back then. Thanks to me, he has become the way he is now." Gerald couldn't help but roll his eyes. Dennis was a good man, but he had a big mouth and liked to brag. Gerald frowned and said, "I'll leave the aftermath to you." As Gerald spoke, he threw the 2 knives to Dennis and said, "Take these 2 knives back. I'll use them when I come back." Dennis put away the knives, then nodded, and said, "Okay." Gerald looked at Mary and Irene for the last time, then turned, and left the country mansion. After walking out of it, Gerald felt much more relaxed. Not long after Gerald left, his phone rang again. He picked up the phone and found that it was a video call from Audrey. Audrey answered the phone. 3 beautiful girls appeared on the screen. "Hey." Audrey looked at Gerald and said with a smile. Gerald asked, "What's the matter? Look at what you are saying. Isn't it your honor that we 3 great beauties call you?" Audrey curled her lips and then said with a smile, "Now I will give you a chance to treat us to a meal." Gerald was lost for words. He curled his lips and said, "What do you want to eat?" "Anything is fine. I don't mind," Audrey said. Kira's eyes suddenly lit up. She said, "I know a place serving rabbits. It tastes good." "Okay. Then send me the address," Gerald said. After hanging up, Kira quickly sent an address over. Gerald was slightly surprised. The address Kira sent was next to Sacramento No. 1 High School. Gerald stopped a car and rushed towards Sacramento No. 1 High School. Half an hour later, at the entrance of Sacramento No. 1 High School, Gerald successfully met Audrey and the other 2. Audrey looked at Gerald and said with a smile, "I have good news for you. Doreen and Henley's engagement banquet has been delayed." Gerald had guessed this outcome. He looked at Audrey and said, "Then why are you here instead of returning to Los Angeles?" Kira had a smile on her face. Audrey and Hazel were stunned. Then Audrey glared and said, "Don't be such a spoilsport." Then Audrey said with a smile, "I have told my dad that I will stay here for a while longer. Hazel's cafe has not opened recently. We have plenty of time. are not convinced. It was good to be born with a silver spoon. Gerald coughed and said, let's go eat. You, huh? At this time, Gerald saw a large crowd of people not far away, and the loud voices of fighting came over. The pancake shop that had been open next to Sacramento #1 High School for many years was over there. What's going on over there? Gerald asked with a frown. I don't know. When we arrived, a lot of people had gathered there. Previously, I thought that they were lining up to buy food. Kira said. Gerald cast his gaze over. In the next instant, his eyes narrowed slightly. In the crowd, he saw a familiar person, Kiri, who had disappeared for a few days. On the street of Sacramento, an off-road vehicle was slowly moving forward. A young man was driving. The corners of his mouth were constantly twitching. Dennis was sitting in the passenger seat, talking continuously. In the back row, Irene and the other two were sitting there. They were not calm because what Dennis told them just now completely exceeded their understanding. It was about Night Watch, a mysterious organization, and watchmen who were responsible for the peace of this world. They were told that Gerald was the most powerful person in this world and that his wealth was hard to count. The richest man in Los Angeles was nothing compared to Gerald. What Dennis said shocked them greatly. Gerald made a move in front of them just now, so the identity of being a watchman could not be kept. Therefore, Dennis could just tell Irene and the other two everything, and then ask them to keep the secret, just like what Bradley did before. So, Dennis told the three about Gerald's identity and the existence of Night Watch. Dennis kept talking. Gerald is indeed awesome. He was the strongest person in Night Watch before. Do you understand? No other watchman can beat him. He is ruthless. He doesn't talk much when he is on a mission. Dennis continued, you have seen these two knives, right? You even sold them. These two knives are the top 10 weapons, and they can't be measured with money. Speaking of these two knives, I suddenly remembered that when I was on a mission in Washington in the early morning, Gerald and I were together. He held these two knives and slaughtered on 8 streets in one night. That battle, TSK, it brought Dennis back to the scenes as he was talking. The driver couldn't help but ask, Dennis, I heard about that battle. I didn't expect you to be with Watchman No. 0. Dennis coughed and said, I was mainly responsible for commanding. You know I fight with my brain. Gerald and Watchman #2 were in charge of fighting. The driver couldn't help but roll his eyes. Mary asked, does Gerald really have a lot of money? Money. Dennis said disdainfully, how should I put it? Gerald once saved a big family behind New Bank from an extremely dangerous person. They are the real bosses of New Bank. These people are hidden behind the scenes. The media will not expose them at all. Gerald's money is immeasurable. After the rescue, that boss sent Gerald a bank card and promised that Gerald could use the funds of New Bank as needed. Dennis added lightly, of course, for Gerald, the industries under him are countless. For example, Gerald has 70% of the shares. Ads by Pub Future of Universe Group in Sacramento, and the value is at least $16 billion. He also has shares in many other large companies. And he even doesn't know exactly how many shares he owns. Anyway, he is very, very rich. Mary, Irene, and women looked at each other. Their eyes were full of regret. They did not have much knowledge. They had no idea how powerful Gerald was according to Dennis' description. What they valued was money. For the money, Irene divorced Gerald and found a rich boyfriend. For the money, after Adriel dumped Irene, Irene begged for remarriage, and Mary messed around at Glory World. However, Glory World was nothing to Gerald. They thought of what Gerald said the last time they met in Los Angeles. If you treat me better, I can even give Glory World to you. After 3 years of marriage, they had gone too far during the divorce. They missed the opportunity to become rich overnight. TSK, now you regret it. Dennis chuckled. Gerald didn't know that Dennis was bragging. It didn't matter anyway, because he was squinting at Kiri in the distance. You guys go to the store and wait for me. I will go over there. To take a look, Gerald said to Audrey and the others. Kira and the other two nodded. When they left, Gerald noticed that Kira's expression was not quite right. There was a small change. It seemed that she was hiding something. There might be something on her mind. I'll ask her later. Gerald thought to himself as looking at the backs of the three girls and rubbed his nose. Then, he turned around and walked towards the pancake shop. When he reached the door, he heard a loud noise. A slightly angry voice sounded. Kiri, don't go too far. How is this to be? This place is yours. My friend and I are tired of walking. Can't we even stand here for a while? Kiri was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase under his arm. As he shook his legs, he shrugged his shoulders and said indifferently. After Gerald approached, he found that there was another acquaintance among the crowd. It was Andrew. Andrew, who was in the crowd, looked at the front and said, Gigi, if you make up with me, I'll help you keep this shop. You know, I still love you. Get lost, you scum. The voice from inside rang again. Obviously, the person who was talking inside was Gigi. Gerald stood outside and listened for a while. He roughly figured out what was going on. Pancakes were not famous street food, but the shop next to Sacramento No. 1 High School was known far and wide. The price was not high, and the taste was good. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Kiri's company built a food street. This street was the first project he took charge of after taking over Mason's company. However, the business was quite bleak. Few visitors came to the street, so many merchants were unwilling to invest. Then, Kiri set his eyes on this pancake shop and proposed to buy their secret recipe, but the price he offered was extremely low. This shop owner made a living on the recipe. Even if the price was high, he might not sell it. Moreover, the price Kiri offered was so low. Therefore, the shop owner was not willing to sell the recipe. Then, Kiri suggested that the owner move the shop to the food street to draw more visitors. However, the rent there was 4 or 5 times higher. Of course, the owner of the pancake shop was unwilling to do so. Then, Kiri called a group of people to block the entrance every day. They did not cause any trouble, but others couldn't buy pancakes. After Gerald figured out what was going on, he narrowed his eyes. As for Andrew, he just came to beg Gigi to get back together and happened to encounter this matter. Kiri shrugged his shoulders indifferently and said, It doesn't matter if you don't give us the secret recipe. Anyway, there are a lot of idle people in our company. I'll ask them to come to you every day to block the door. I wonder how you will do business. In the shop, a middle-aged couple sighed. Gigi, who was in front, shouted with a red face, Kiri, don't go too far. What's wrong with me? Do you think I did something illegal? Go sue me. Kiri looked like a rascal. Beside him, Andrew said, Gigi, as long as you reconcile with me, I promise to help you solve this problem. Kenneth will show regard for me. Gigi ignored him and continued, If you don't leave, I will call the police. Go ahead, Kiri said. When the patrolman leaves, I will come back and continue to block the door. Gigi's face changed slightly. Facing such a rogue, she was a little powerless, and her eyes became a little red. The middle-aged woman smiled bitterly. Fenna, don't worry about it. We can't beat them. At worst, I'll close the door and open another one in another city. Her voice was somewhat helpless and unwilling. The business of the pancake shop was run on a shoestring. In this area, they had many regular customers. The business was good. If they went to other cities, they would have to make efforts to get regular customers. Kiri, Does your family know about your doing this? Gerald, who was at the back of the crowd, suddenly asked. When the voice sounded, everyone looked over. The moment they saw Gerald, they were surprised. Andrew frowned and said, "Why are you everywhere?" Gerald ignored him and walked to Gigi. Gigi's eyes were red, and she looked helpless. She stared at Gerald with red eyes, as if she was asking for help. Gerald gazed at Gigi and asked, "Do you know what is the best way to deal with rogues?" Gigi shook her head. Gerald looked at Kiri beside him, then raised his fist. "It is to beat them up."